Batman White Knight Presents Von Freeze issue 1 sees a young Victor's father shoot and kill a man in the woods. As the man dies, he tells Victor to take the baby he had in his arms and promise him he will protect her. Years later, Victor's reminiscing is interrupted by a woman who says that they refuse to be part of his research at Wayne Cryotech. Victor tries to convince her, but she knows this technology was once funded by the Nazis. She asks where Victor's conscience is and how he's okay with this, but Victor tells her that he feels hope when he's in this lab, hope for the future of medicine, but also sometimes he hates it thanks to where the science found its roots and wants to burn it all down. The woman thinks that history won't forgive the evil men like his father, and Victor thinks they shouldn't, and the woman should be upset, but if she wants him to, he will close down the lab, but only after he's said what he needs to say. Before he can tell her the real reason they were able to escape the war, Victor's assistant tells them that Mr. Wayne needs his help. Rushing into the lab, Victor finds that Martha is about to give birth. Thomas says that they just saw their doctor that morning and everything was fine, but Victor looks over the doctor's notes, finding that it might be an amniotic fluid embolism and it's easily missable. They aren't going anywhere though thanks to the blizzard outside, so the cryotech is Martha's only option, and if Victor doesn't hurry, Martha's lungs will begin to collapse. Racing into the cryolab to help, telling Victor that he's taking lead on this surgery since this is his wife, his baby, and his lab. However, Victor reminds him that he hasn't practiced medicine in years, but Thomas says that Victor will be there to help him. The men get to work, but as Thomas goes to put the IV drip into Martha's arm, his hands begin to shake. Victor tells him he's a father now, not a businessman or a surgeon, and it's different when one's wife and child are on the line. Victor takes over, trying to get Martha stabilized, as Thomas comforts his wife while she falls unconscious from the anesthesia. The machines activate and she begins to stabilize as Victor orders the nurse to inject cryogel into her. Thomas and Victor step outside while the nurse works, and Thomas says that all he thought about was Martha, not his baby or anything like that, and wonders what kind of father that makes him. Victor says that he will be a great father and he will become what his family needs him to be. Talk turns to Victor's father, the Baron, but Victor says that he hasn't talked to him in a long time. Thomas hoped that he could see his face when he found out him and Victor were working together and wonders what Victor had told him about it. Learning Victor had told him that he was offered redemption for all the awful things that they did during the war and for what happened to Jacob. Thomas is intrigued at this Jacob character, and Victor reveals that he was one of the Baron's best friends before the war and they met in university, partnering together and setting up a lab. But soon anti-Semitism infected Germany and made Jacob, a Jewish man, a target, but it made him more determined to succeed. Both men refused to quit, but soon the Third Reich came into power, and after Hitler was elected as leader, the Baron asked Jacob to leave the country since his family's safety was more important than their cryo work. Jacob refused and continued his cryogenic research, even giving his entire family fortune to the Baron and erasing his last name from the company to protect them. Young Victor found himself jealous his father would work with Jacob and not him in the lab, and he used to sneak into the lab to work, which led to him breaking some of their work, causing his father to beat him mercilessly. Victor ran from the lab but was soon found by Jacob, who cared for the injured boy. Jacob and his family were loving and caring towards Victor, treating him as one of their own, even after Jacob learned he was going to be a father soon. The Baron began to resent Jacob for taking an interest in Victor, and soon while Jacob's wife gives birth to their daughter, the Baron met with Himmler, who was desperate to give the SS anything to help in the war efforts, like an iced death ray he wanted the Baron to make. But the Baron turns him down thanks to his business partner probably objecting. Himmler reminds him that he doesn't have a choice in the matter, and so the Baron was forced to join the SS. The Baron revealed his new work to Jacob, who was so upset at the betrayal. The Baron says he never had a choice in the matter, but wearing their uniform was the only way to protect their work. Jacob refuses to hear it, saying their partnership was now over. The Baron wants to continue to protect Jacob and his family, but Jacob refuses, telling him they won't be his prisoners. After learning he has no choice, Jacob reluctantly agrees to sneak his family into the new lab's location in the mountains. Once there, they learned the horrible truth of the lab, that it was a lab that runs experiments on Jewish prisoners, testing out the new death ray. Jacob was outraged, punching the Baron, and as the Baron waves off some men who come to investigate the tussle, Jacob gathers his people, packing their things to leave. The Baron finds them, begging for them to stay, but he is adamant that they are leaving. Jacob tells Victor to meet them at the lab's back entrance later, and soon they escape from the lab. The group make their way past the guard outposts, but in the deep forest they are found by the Nazis. The officer hits Jacob down, but before the officer can kill him, the Baron arrives, telling the officer that he knows these Jewish people since they escaped his facility. The Baron pulls rank on the man, telling him his experiments are above their pay grade and orders the man to take them back unharmed. As they are loaded into a truck, Jacob grabs for the Baron's gun, causing him to be shot in the chest. Jacob picks up his daughter, giving it to Victor and telling him to protect Nora. Victor promises to protect her, and the Baron tells the officer Jacob needs a doctor, but the Nazi grabs him, telling him that he will go to his lab now or he will kill him. The truck with the Jewish prisoners drives away as the Baron goes to Jacob's side. The man retrieves the freeze gun he stole from the lab from his bag, telling the Baron to get his people out of Germany before he dies. The Baron asks if his son is okay and tells him not to panic, and getting the cold gun, he tells his son to follow him and do exactly what he says. Victor confronts the truck that has the prisoners in it, using the freeze gun to trap all of the men in ice and killing them all one by one. The prisoners are freed, and the Baron and Victor tell them that they will need to move quickly to get them out of Germany. Using the van, they escape the forest and get their family all the way to France, where they are taken in by the French resistance. The resistance want to kill the Baron, but they would rather keep him hostage until the Allied invasion, where he eventually made his way to the US. Victor finishes his story, and Thomas had no idea about any of this. He wonders if Victor's assistant has heard the story, and she has, since she is Nora, and she never really knew what happened to her family, and she was too afraid to ask. She says it was the remainder of her family who insisted she seek out Victor, as the nurse tells them that Martha is now ready. Before going into the lab, Thomas gives Victor his grandfather's pocket watch, telling him to hold on to it for a while. Martha is found to be in good health, and the Waynes thank Victor for his help, where in the present, an aged Victor gives the pocket watch back to Bruce, saying no matter it be a husband, surgeon, business leader, or a friend, commitment to others runs deep in the Wayne bloodline, and Bruce shouldn't let anyone tell him differently. Bruce tearfully thanks Victor for the watch, saying he's given him exactly what he needed. Leaving Victor's lab and saying goodbye to Nora, Bruce meets with Harley out by the Batmobile, telling her he got what he needed as they race into the snowy Gotham City. Von Freeze issue 1 was a fantastic one-shot that looks into the past of Victor Freeze and his family's dark secrets. It's a great book full of things that will hopefully educate people on certain things that happened during World War II, since the story of Nazi scientists testing on Jewish prisoners and prisoners in general was all too real, as is them eventually joining the US and becoming scientists after the war. And hopefully this maybe gets people to go and actually look up that stuff, because while it's very terrifying, it's also very interesting. I have to wonder why they decided to release it now and not during the first volume of White Knight, where Freeze was the main villain of that book, more or less, since it doesn't really make sense putting it between issues of a story about Jean-Paul Valley and Azrael. It doesn't really make much sense or add anything to that story. Nonetheless, this was a really solid issue that expanded the universe of the White Knight, and I really enjoyed it. I'm going to give this issue a 9 out of 10. A 9